Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will go ahead and start in another 1 minute. We'll let everyone join in and we'll go ahead and get started with the session. I hope you are enjoying the conference. It's one of the amazing conference I totally love. All right, I can see the people are joining. So, hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about hidden mysteries of the code. Why are we even talking about it? Because this is something which is very, very important, and this actually needs a lot of attention. And a bit about myself while we start the session. I'm security relations leader at Sneak, and I'm also on the OWASP Global Board of Directors. And there are a few diversity initiatives that I'm running in India, from leading InfoSec Girls to InfoSec Diversity to many other things. And while we talk about that, I do want to share that we do run a lot of mentoring programs with InfoSec Diversity, and we'll be very happy if you join there. And I would love to connect with you, all of you, after the session, and you can keep posting all your questions in the chat box. I'll be very glad to take up your questions. Now, when we talk about these hidden mysteries, what do you see in this picture? Do you see something strange? Do you see something different, or what it is? There is a kid who is actually speaking to a robot. Does this seem normal? I feel that yes, it seems normal. But then, how much of a data robot learns about our child, and where is the information stored? Is it stored safely? How do we know? If I think about it, where does the robot gets its software update from? And can this stream source be compromised? Think about if we it's uploading the data somewhere, or it's downloading a patch from somewhere, and that source itself is compromised. What can happen when it gets compromised? What's the probability that someone hacks into it and can watch the video feed? And we are talking about child. I also have kids at home, so sometimes it scares me because we do have a lot of smart devices at home. So these are some of the things that actually uh, keep me just curious about what's going to happen next. Now, if you've joined this session, that means you care about software security and you want to know that what are the hidden mysteries of the software code. And I would like to share with you the real world stories of how the developers play a fundamental role in recent and growing security incidents. Why you should care about software supply chain security. And I'll also leave you off with a thought that where do you actually put the trust on? The first thing, have you ever thought developers can be a malware distribution vehicle? I never thought so. And I can never imagine also. But as we learned by the Thompson's Trojan horse story, which date back to 1984, if you go back and look for it, developers have been targeted as a vehicle of distribution malwares. There was a huge big journal which was actually shared. Now, that was long back, but now we are in 2021. Do we still see such kind of incidents? In 2018, the JavaScript ecosystem witnessed its first high impact, spearheaded surgical attack targeting maintainers and developers working in the open source and themselves being used as an attack vehicle to distribute malicious JavaScript files or JavaScript code, which was designed to decrypt itself. How scary that would be, where a malware is decrypting itself and then running it in a specific environment, which is specifically targeting developers of a Bitcoin wallet application. This was a very well-known event stream incident. Now, if we talk about like how old that is, so event stream existing on the npm.js registry ecosystem since 2011 practically did not receive any new releases in the last 2 years, but gained millions and millions of downloads per week. Out of the blue, a person shows up on the GitHub repository and says that I want to help. As in, this is normal because when we talk about open source, we all want to volunteer, we all want to support, we all want to help out. And now, while we talk about it, there are so many other things which are there. They further, if this person keeps on contributing and suddenly says that I don't want to contribute anymore, what do you see? Will you feel that there is something wrong there? Absolutely. No, you have everything going right, and suddenly somebody plugs off electricity from your house and say, "Oh, this is your house, and now you can enjoy." Would you be scared? Absolutely. So the same thing happened, and it was a pre-planned thing. Now, what furthermore can happen? How many downloads which are there? So, as per an academic research paper which was published in 2019, just a year after that, which investigated the properties of language based software ecosystems and found that 61% of the open source packages on NPM could be considered abandoned because they did not receive any release in the prior 12 months. That's the case with NPM.js. But what about rest of the other ones? That can be even more scary. What do we know about Java ecosystem? What do we know about Python ecosystem? There are so many languages. And what happens? Of course, I don't need to tell you that because half of the time coding is spent waiting for the packages to install or to update. And how much do you really know about your dependencies? And let's take a look at what happens in the language-based software ecosystems. If we talk about this whole event stream attack, which was package owned by Dominic Tarr, exists on npm repository since 2011, this actually created a lot of havoc. And if I talk about the popular packages, and with the open source registries as big as npm may risk lure us, and even more with Java, even more with Python. Now we are using Python a lot. So this can happen with any ecosystem. And one of which is that similar packages or the popular packages reach more than 1 lakh than other packages. And if one registry or one third party dependency is vulnerable, where things could go wrong? How many dependencies do we have in our code? Do we know about that? Maybe, maybe not. And that's why we have started to talk about software composition analysis. Correct? And that's when how much do we know about our own app? And here it's actually a mental exercise. Imagine you build an app which could be in Java, Node, or maybe any other language. So your mental image of your application is this following big blob, which shows it as a wholesome end-to-end functioning application. But actually, who? How much is our code? This is the reality. And this is the code which we have written, the red dot or the purple dot. And this is actually, if we start imagining the yellow one, that's a huge amount of code that we are using as open source. So as per one of the research, 80 to 90% of the code on the internet, it's actually open source. So what about the rest of the ones? That means that is the in-house code. So how much that would be? 10 to 20%. So that's the most scary part. And now let me come back to the direct dependencies and indirect dependencies. So it's hard to imagine the days of writing software without any open source dependencies. And I am a huge preacher of open source dependencies. I am associated with many open source communities, and OWASP being one of the top ones. So managing these dependencies for a project is an important task and requires proper due diligence to correctly keep the track of those libraries you actually depend on. Does it happen or not? Now, after all, these applications that we are deploying bundles our code as well as our dependencies. That's like one thing. Now, it is even more. We are talking about cloud native applications. We are talking about containers. We are talking about Kubernetes, and we want everything cloud native. So we have to understand what vulnerabilities come from a typical ecosystem, as well as when we found that 78% of all security vulnerabilities are found in indirect dependencies. And what are those indirect dependencies? So indirect dependencies are those that we have very less control on, or even mostly we will not be even aware about it. So we get to know this is a dependency which might be vulnerable, and we fix it or we update it. But there are some things which can't be even updated. So what should we do with them? How should we get to know about them? And if I talk about this electron natify incident, or the new incident which happened in 2019, as if we didn't learn anything from the event stream incident, 1 year later, exact 1 year later, the electron natify native notify incident took place. So what happened with that? At one point in time, an existing version of electron natify native notify had no malware in it. A user added to a dependency tree of a popular package. Now, then the user releases a new version of that Electron package, which now includes the malware. So think about, the older version did not have a malware. Now the new version has a malware. So as a result, the Agama crypto wallet is built with most recent version of the upstream EasyDex package that includes the malware. Does it sound familiar? And what happened after that? How many packages were downloaded? And how was it used? So it went on and on. Now, that wasn't it. If somebody starts attacking the heart of developers, how much of a thought are we giving in the security of our own development infrastructure? Resources like our cloud instances, our staging environments, or even our continuous integration and deployment pipelines tooling. On top of it, our IDEs. Do we keep that up to date? Let me tell you something. So in January 2021, a security researcher broke into Microsoft Visual Studio Code GitHub repository, essentially providing him with the capabilities of making code modifications. So to the popular and very well known IDE, or popularly loved IDE, that many developers use, and I personally use myself. Hmm, wasn't that scary? Maybe. But what happened after that? Due to a command injection flaw, it was made possible that a valid attack vector can actually get into any of the repositories. So simply by opening a new code pull request, the researcher was now able to execute code that was the VS Code CI scripts were running everywhere without even requiring any sort of authentication or authorization. That scares me, and I'm going to show it to you. Now, this leads to remote reverse shells on the CI service. Do you really believe that? So, this happened with that. And on top of it, the wonderful part of that was that, or I would say, we were fortunate enough that the researcher responsibly disclosed that or reported it to Microsoft, and we were saved. But that was just one off thing. Hmm. Open source security. How much of a thought have we given on the open source security? How much do we know about our current state of open source security? Think about this vulnerability. So, as a case study, we refer to Markdown own security vulnerability from several years back. So, Marked is a Markdown parser for the web downloaded millions times a week, and one of the most popular libraries for this purpose in the JavaScript and Node.js ecosystem. But one day, a security researcher opened a code pull request which reports and fixes XSS vulnerabilities. Now, included test for future code regressions. Hmm. Now, this was reported in 2015, but when was it fixed? In 2016, an year later. So, if we don't fix the vulnerabilities, where things could go wrong, we can imagine. And on top of that, if a maintainer's account itself gets compromised. So there was a research which was done in 2017 where this researcher tried and get to know about Node.js Foundation, and so conducted this research in which he wanted to assess the state of security of weak NPM credentials, which are used by the maintainers. And what his work revealed: 14% of the NPM JS ecosystem, they were using the very insecure passwords. And they were able to publish access to these repositories. And some of these modules are downloaded tens of millions of times a week. and which are essential and key part of thriving JavaScript ecosystem. And the problem was rooted with insecure passwords, which was chosen by the maintainer's account. Now, while we talk about that, I have a question for all of you, or a food for thought for all of you, wherein if I tell you that, uh, do you ever share your toothbrush with anyone? I'm sure we all use toothbrushes, right? But do you ever share your toothbrush with anyone? Like literally anyone. It's a personal hygiene. So I'm sure you don't share that. Now, when we don't share that, do we actually share our passwords? We do. So your passwords are like toothbrushes. When we don't share toothbrush, why do we share our passwords? Think of it. And when these things were happening, can we do it? Can we do something better with our security hygiene? Absolutely. So there was another research that was checked, which wherein the largest registries in the open source ecosystem packages, which are downloading multiple times, which are getting downloaded multiple times, the maintainers were not using two-factor authentication. And in 2019, the stats actually increased a bit to 7.1% and then 9.27%. But is that enough? No. And that's when a security researcher or a cybersecurity expert, Bruce Schneider, said in his book, which is Secrets and Lies, that humans often represent the weakest link in the chain. Can we agree more? Now, a term coined in Linus Law back in 1999 by Eric Raymond on his work. And when we talk about that, is it really? Think about this one. In January 2021 itself, it was discovered that sudo, a common utility which is installed on many Linux distribution systems, has a security vulnerability. What is that? Specifically, any privileged user can gain root access just based on the default sudo configuration, which is so daunting. And especially, think about 10 years back, 10 whole years. And that wasn't enough. We saw supply chain attacks, which were impacting everyone, literally everyone. And solar winds came with a huge wind where everybody started talking about these supply chain attacks, even though they have been there for a very, very long time. So, can we really deny being part of any open source ecosystem? Any consumer, as contributors, or maybe even as a maintainer, we all play some part in the world where 90% of the application code is made up of open source component, right? My own website is built on open source component. Now, diamonds are forever, like they're everywhere. And we've reached a point where we take open source for granted. And open source registries are open in the nature and allow our developers to openly push their packages. So can't we just go ahead and use it? Absolutely, we can use it, but we need to keep certain things in mind. Because if we don't keep that, there could be big troubles. And on top of it, what we really saw is that the libraries, if I have huge list of libraries to support an ecosystem, and I suddenly remove all of them, will there be a problem for ecosystem? Everything will start failing, and people will start to see that these are some weaknesses. And that gives us a lesson wherein the weakness is how business fail to manage the open source ecosystem and expose their own sweet spot, and how registries did not foresee this as a problem, which is a huge problem. If somebody is giving us some libraries and suddenly pull their hands off, how will I go ahead and manage it? And that wasn't it. If we start having those malicious packages in our code, so how do you even track them? And if we accidentally install even one of those packages, could be a typo spreading mistake or maybe something planting some of these in a nested dependency tree, or by any chance, how what is the chance of finding them? Probably zero. We have so much to take care of in our ecosystem. Malicious packages aren't just a thing on the JavaScript ecosystem, they're everywhere, as I said. And similarly, this year in March 2021, more than 3,000 malicious packages were published on the PyPy registry. Oh my God, that wasn't it. To further show us how attackers can harness open source to their advantage, Alex Bersin published the research in February 2021 about how we exploited design flaws in package managers, registries, and human error to infiltrate into corporate. Now, which all, from Apple to Microsoft to many big organizations, right? It is for everyone, every organization. They are trying to educate customers about it. They are trying to educate all of us about it. So I would like to leave you with the following questions to ponder upon. Are we going to have a less or more software, or uh, are we going to use less or more open source software in the future? And who should we trust? Think about it. Now, when we are here, can we do without a demo? No. So let me go ahead and show you here. Where is my browser? Okay, so here is my browser where I'm going to go ahead and show you my app. And I hope demo gods shower their blessings on me. Hmm. All right, please, please. Move. So what happens is, at a lot of times when we are in the session, the demo gods don't shower their blessings, and we are stuck with the demo. So here we are ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to register for free, because every time I do that, oh, don't use my personal email address. So yeah, I'll say DOS is my name, DOS at test.com, because we are a day of she security. Password is don't use any insecure password. It's not good. And whenever possible, use a password manager. So I'm not suggesting any password manager, but any password manager that you like. So here, let me show you this app. So whenever I go for any application, the first thing I do is check them out, and that's what I do. Here, it's about home. Okay, that's home. What else? My account. It's giving me certain information about my account. I can create a to-do list. Okay, perfect. I can upload some files. Interesting. I have my files. Probably the uploaded files should come here. Nice. What else is there? About, then some information about homepage, license, struts to, Spring, Hibernate. Do we see all of these information generally? I think we don't see them. And when we don't see them, what do we really do? Uh, Here, it's giving me some juicy information if you look at it. So this is the same version which was part of one of the biggest breach. And maybe that breach actually stuck with me, which I can say that one of the very well-known breach, which was Apache Struts Equifax breach. Now, this is a vulnerable version. As an attacker, it's a good information for me. Maybe for a person who's just a developer, might not even look at it. Then it's fine. Okay. Now, while I go to to-do list, because I love making to-do lists, so I'll say DOS. I'll say DOS 1, and the due date, I would make sure that it's um, we are in 2021, so we will select something around November. And okay, no, why I use these to-do lists, because I remember that these are the things that I have to do. So while I create a to-do list, it has created. Now I want to create another to-do list. Could be with the Vandana is a hacker. No, it's a hacker, and that's fine. 2021, and I'm going to create it. Okay, that's nice. But now I wear a hat of an attacker. I know that there is something fishy here. And what is that fishy here? It is vulnerable version. But now, can I do something about it? Let me use some some special symbols, or something which is not an alphabet. So I'm going to create a to-do list. I'm going to use this as a pi. So this is a pi symbol, as we all know. Now I'm going to create to-do list. Do you see something strange here? So this is actually not a pi symbol. It has been converted to a ASCII character. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and upload some files. Okay. Now I'm an attacker. So what I want is I want something to be exploited. And as any other attacker, I do have my exploits. So this is the code. And here it takes some of the zip files. So I'm going to go ahead and use zip slip and I'm going to upload. Okay. Now you must be interested in knowing what I did. So let me showcase here. So this is the whole code that I have. Let me try and see expand. All right. Yes. Okay. Now, while I use that, I go to the exploit folder. Here I have some of the exploits, and there is one exploit which is specific to struts. So here, if you see that I am going to run some command and I'm going to fetch some details. Interesting. But there are multiple other scripts which are there, which are part of it, which I can leverage. And especially if I know it's a Tomcat server, I'm going to play around with it. Now, what I have done is I have uploaded a zip slip folder. Now, what problem could be there? So let me show you something interesting with it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and where should I go? Okay, my browser. So where is my browser? Where is? Okay, it's here. Now, when I uploaded the file, it just got uploaded. I'm going to come here and go to my files. I see good.txt. Interesting. I uploaded a zip file and I can see only txt file, but never mind. Let me go ahead and create a to-do list. Now I'll say Vandana, date, and I'm going to create something. Huh? Where is Vandana? Gotcha. Do you see something different? Why it's happening? Let me go ahead and create another list. What happened to my account? Vandana is not a hacker. I'm going to change the date. I'm going to create another list. Similar things are happening. Now, think about if this happens to any of our applications. Will it be scary? Absolutely. So that's why when we are talking about any of these breaches, they give us some lessons. And what we've learned with the Equifax breach, it was not, so no one is to be blamed for. The only thing that we have to learn from it is that we have to make sure that we keep our systems up to date. We keep our environment up to date. Even if I talk about the OWASP latest vulnerabilities, like the whole list of vulnerabilities, what it talks about, there are certain new sections which have come up. See, SSRF has been added to it, which is on A10. There's a huge shuffle between the vulnerabilities. Injection, which used to be on top, that has come down to third. Broken access control to cryptographic failures to using components with known vulnerable. These things have come up. Now, while that happens, it only showcases us that any ecosystem that we use can be critical. Now, while I was giving the presentation, I was showcasing that. Okay, let me show you this Visual Studio Code. And while I was showcasing the developers ecosystem and Visual Studio Code issues, so here there are some extensions which are there. Like I'm a huge fan of extensions. I want things to be automated. I want things to be used in a way where it helps me in understanding better. Now, while I use that, there is another important thing, which is actually uh, around extensions, which could be outdated. So let me search for this instant markdown. Now, there are certain versions which are there. Do you see this? So here I can install it, right? This is the latest version I'm installing and it's all good. But what I am going to do, if let's say I'm going to go ahead, install another version of it. So it's going to search for an older version 1 year ago. So this was there 1 year ago. So right now it's installing another version. Now this I am showcasing to you because think of a scenario where there is an update and you don't update. Will there be a problem? Could be a problem, right? Could be a problem. So, do you use phones? I'm sure we all use phones. So now when we use phones, um, what exactly do we do with them? Do we keep them up to date, or do we keep them just as like software lingering? We don't want that, right? And that's when there are few important lessons that we learned that keep our softwares up to date. Now, here with this instant markdown, this plugin is a vulnerable plugin. And any of you are in the audience, if you're using this and you are, you go to my own website, I can fetch all details from you, literally anything. And that's what scares the most. So, just one plugin. I'm using my Azure DevOps pipeline, my AWS pipeline, all of these using Visual Studio Code because everything is at my hands. But if it's a vulnerable version, if my developer ecosystem itself or my development environment itself is vulnerable, am I secure? No, I am not. So what should I do? Like these are some basic things, and there are so many exploits that exist in the market, from struts to tomcat to whatnot. Let me go ahead and show you something here. From dependency vulnerabilities to application vulnerabilities, what are the things that we can take care of? The most important aspect is to understand that what we have in our environment. A lot of times we don't even know that there are things that exist in the environment. So let me tell you a scenario wherein, where, like, we used to have those scrum meetings, and in one of the scrum meeting, what happened, there was a critical release that was supposed to happen, but one fine day they did not even invite me at the scrum meeting, because the scrum meeting happened 15 minutes early, because they were thinking security would be an issue there. But if security is not embedded in the ecosystem, things will start to fail apart. And we found a production bug. It took me good 6 months to actually collaborate with them, to make them understand that yes, there are things that can be fixed. There are things that are there, and we're going to be working on it together. There was a trust that we built over time. And if somebody would try and attack this ecosystem from external, we will avoid that. And similarly, that there was one case that happened wherein there was a medium finding, and due to an update, it became critical. And I did not figure it out. The development team figured it out, because there was a bond that was built. And it's not just the developer's responsibility to understand security, where we keep talking about that. It's everyone's responsibility. And it's our responsibility to understand that what's there in the environment. Because till the time you don't know about your own house, how will you lock it? So you have a big house and there are multiple doors. You close all the doors so that no thief can come in. But then there are windows, and you don't have even clue about it, that where all we do have the windows. So windows are opened, or whether you have locked it or not. So will they come in? Maybe you don't even know about that. So that's when they are trying to target open source vulnerabilities, we need to have a proper repository. And that's why a software bill of material, enterprise application library, those are the things that helps. And if I remember correctly, President Joe Biden also talked about software bill of materials, and many organizations have started to pick up. If you want to know more about software bill of materials, even Cyclone DX is one of the OWASP projects which just got its a flagship status and join hands with OWASP. It's one amazing project for software bill of materials. While I talk about that, this is something goes in our head. Application security is so challenging. It is, because we have one foot in the door with the open source dependencies, other cloud native world. That's another story altogether. What if we make it easier, developer friendly, and actionable? So, what do we really need to do? We need the best practices for the open source security. We need to know what are the open source libraries we have. And now there could be one question which you might be thinking that is there any tool which can help me in understanding what are the tools which might be available, which can tell me what are the third party libraries which are part of my ecosystem. There is one called dependency check. And if you are using it, or if you're setting up a supply chain or software supply chain, then dependency track is amazing project. It gives you 70 to 80% amazing result. It is mapped with NVD database. It downloads and checks out. I personally have used it, so I can vouch for it. And if you have any questions around that, or if you want to know more about it, I am running a series called uh, OWASP Spotlight series, wherein you can get to know more about the OWASP projects and just spend 15 minutes on each of those projects. And I'll be happy to share that with you here. So you can just look at all of the projects. So open source is awesome, but use it responsibly. And let's use our developers' powers for good and be good with each other. Thank you so much for listening to me and be part of the session. If you have any questions, I am here. I have another 10 more minutes. I'm going to be here. Please do feel free to ask any of your questions. Let me go ahead and stop sharing and we can get started with the questions. You can just go ahead and join the session. We can have a conversation around it because I know that I know bits and pieces of it. I'm sure that you also know a lot about it. So we can go ahead and discuss about it. Please go ahead and you can unmute yourself or you can request to join the session. I'll be happy to chat with you around it. See, these dependencies um, are there for like a very long time, and they're going to be there. When we talk about open source is not just for a day or for 2 days or for a year. It's going to be here forever because now the dependencies on these open source components is becoming huge. Day by day, it's getting increased. So when it is getting increased, it becomes even more evident that we need to address the challenges which are there. We need to go ahead and understand that what are the things that we can do to make sure that we are not becoming prone to these attacks which are there. So I'm going to be around. If you have any question, please do feel free to post me here and I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. Oh, perfect. I have a question. Thanks, Karen. So Karen says, in your opinion, what do you find to be the most useful tool in getting code to be more secure? So there is no silver bullet to actually secure the code because when we talk about the code, we have our homegrown code which we build, and we've been talking about let's do a secure code review. Let's do a secure code review. So we've been using for a very long time and we've used multiple commercial tools and open source tools and that's there. But how about software composition analysis, the third party libraries? For that we need certain kind of a tool which actually helps us out with that as well. Okay, now we have got a project which actually takes care of both. Now on top of it, there is another thing, containers. So we need also a project or a tool that helps us with container security as well. So we need to look from a holistic picture that what we really need. And there are many wonderful tools in the market. And here, I would not be taking any of the names, but if you want to know about open source, please try OWASP dependency check. It's one of my favorites. I'm sure it's going to be helpful. And if you still have any doubts about it, do reach out to Steve Springett, who is actually taking care of the project. Or you can reach out to me. I'll connect you both, and you can look at the Spotlight series as well, which will help. I hope that answers your question. Okay, there is something. I will start with your OWASP project Spotlight, but I am a computer science student who has recently segued into cybersec or DevOps, and this seems to be a very important intersection. I totally agree. This is a very important intersection. And let me share something important with you while you are talking about that. So if you look at this with the link that I just posted, So this talks about breaking into InfoSec, because InfoSec is not just about AppSec or network security. It has multiple aspects, from DevSecOps to vulnerability management to bug bounty hunting to red teaming to whatnot. And even developer advocacy or security advocacy is again something which is happening big time in InfoSec. So I have tried to cover some of these areas, and in the coming few weeks, you will see more and more of it coming. And if you think that there is something that I've missed as part of the series, please do feel free to reach out to me. I could have covered, but then I felt if I would invite some of the industry leaders who are actually part of it to be part to actually speak about those topics. So for threat modeling, I invited Adam Shostak. For red teaming, Abhishek. There are a few topics. So for DevSecOps, where you would see a session soon by Clint Gibbler. So there'll be multiple sessions that you'll see that coming, which will be specifically for students. And you can reach out to me anytime if you have any doubt about that what are the things which are there. If I don't know the answer, I'll make sure that I'll get an answer for you, or share some information with you. So please feel free to drop me a note on my LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. All right, then what I'll do is I'll stay here in the chat, like I'll leave the stage, and I'm going to be here for some more time. Please do feel free to post anything. Okay. All right, that's very, very interesting. How do you see the role of cryptography playing into the idea of baking security into software development versus layering security on top? Cryptography is very, very important. And even let me share the OWASP top 10 list with you, where it talks about cryptographic failures. Because if we don't have the right encryption, we can be in a really, really big trouble. And that's when you will see things started to fail. So if you look at this top 10 list itself, it talks about that, yes, layering is okay, layering is there. And we've been using these layering things. But what about identities? Aren't we supposed to manage those? And yeah, I agree. Wrong encryption or incorrect encryption or weak encryption can be a huge challenge. It is a huge problem for everyone, not for an organization, not for one person, but for everyone. Everyone needs to take care of these encryption technologies, and that's why we keep on enhancing on it. And that's why even OWASP top 10 has included it as part of the major change. Like, I have seen OWASP for a very, very long time, but the kind of change that has happened in this top 10, it's huge. It's actually big one. So I am totally in awe of this. So do check out this top 10 list, and I'm always open for any conversation, any discussion that you want to do, or anything that you have in mind. Alrighty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave here, and I'm going to be in the networking section. Thank you. Thanks for joining my session.